On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, Day 176. The next low-level round of hostage negotiations is due to begin in Cairo. Negotiating countries are trying to find a way to get the sides to agree to just the first phase of the truce. The IDF reports more prominent Hamas figures that are killed in al-Shifa hospital, including commanders of rocket launching divisions and leaders in Hamas's intelligence units. 3 ships bound for the Gaza Strip departed Cyprus today, carrying 400 tons of food aid. UNIFIL officials injured in a blast that hits their car in Lebanon. Hezbollah blamed the IDF. The IDF stated that no fire occurred in that region. The buffer zone that the IDF is establishing in Gaza will reportedly occupy 16% of the Strip's territory. The IDF also appears to be constructing checkpoint areas for more prolonged activity throughout the Strip in the foreseeable future. Hello everyone, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of March 30th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 31st, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, another round of hostage negotiations of the lower-level staff is commencing in Cairo on Sunday. The main point of disagreement at the moment remains the return of internally displaced Gazans back to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Hamas is demanding complete freedom of movement and canceling the IDF's Netzarim corridor and the checkpoints that divide the southern parts of the Gaza Strip from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Israel is reportedly refusing, stating that this will allow Hamas to completely reestablish itself in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Israel previously accepted a United States compromise for the gradual return of several thousand Palestinians each day during the truce that will go through IDF checkpoints. However, Hamas did not budge on its initial condition, saying, no, there has to be complete freedom of movement, no IDF checkpoints, and no restrictions. According to reports, the teams are meeting now to attempt to find a way to, quote-unquote, square the circle and see if a breakthrough can be achieved, which will then involve the more senior staff coming together and working out the other parts of the deal. Al-Qarara al-Akhbariya news network quoted Egyptian security sources today, stating that Qatar is also involved in trying to resume a round of talks also that will happen in parallel in Qatar. This comes amidst a lot of criticism that was raised in Israel in the last several days about the fact that Qatar did not apply, according to Israel, enough pressure on Hamas in the previous round to get Hamas to actually compromise in its position. In addition to this, it was reported today that in the previous round of negotiations, Israel proposed to release all the Palestinian prisoners who were previously released in the Shalit deal of 2011 and since arrested, in exchange for returning the bodies of 2 IDF soldiers that were killed in the Gaza Strip when Israel last invaded the Gaza Strip in 2014, and their bodies have been held by Hamas since then. Hamas reportedly did not address this in the previous answer. However, this is one of the things that is on the agenda to be discussed in the new round of negotiations in Cairo, Israel's proposal, and if Hamas is going to give any response or has considered this offer. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars that were reported fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF announced that it has killed several more prominent figures of Hamas's fighting ranks in al-Shifa hospital. I remind everyone that al-Shifa hospital is in Gaza City. The IDF is now operating in the hospital compound for over 2 weeks and is constantly reporting more and more people who were arrested or high-profile people who were killed in the battles. Among those who was killed is Mahmoud Halil Zakzouk. He's a deputy commander of rocket launching divisions for Hamas in Gaza City. He was reportedly killed in the same battle in which Raed Thabit, who is the most senior figure that has been killed in al-Shifa thus far, was reported by the IDF. If you're interested in more details about Thabit, check out my summary from March 28th. There I discuss he is the most prominent figure that thus far has been found and killed in al-Shifa hospital. In addition to Zakzouk, other people that the IDF reported were killed in the last 24 hours is Fadi Dawiq. He's a senior figure in Hamas's intelligence units and one of the people who reportedly orchestrated terror attacks in the West Bank for Hamas. He also has reportedly carried out a terror attack in Israel in 2002, killing 4 Israelis. He was reportedly killed in a gun battle and a chase through the maternity ward of al-Shifa hospital. In addition, Zakaria Najib is one of the people who are in charge of coordination between Hamas's Gaza divisions and the West Bank divisions. In addition, he was also an operative who participated in the kidnapping of Nachshon Waxman. He's an IDF soldier who was kidnapped and killed in the early 1990s. Both Fadi Dawiq and Zakaria Najib were also previously Palestinian prisoners that were held in Israeli jails. They were released in the Shalit deal of 2011 and expelled from the West Bank, one of them to Turkey, and the other one to the Gaza Strip. In addition to these, the IDF reported that the operation in al-Shifa is still ongoing. Many operatives were arrested, and substantial weaponry, including sniper gear, guns, grenades, and intelligence documents, have been collected and found and confiscated within the different buildings of the hospital. In addition to this, both the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, that is the military wing of Fatah, and the Al-Quds Brigades, that is the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also reported on the fighting in and around al-Shifa Hospital. They stated that many gun battles occurred and that they engaged the IDF forces in several different buildings within the compound, and also stated that they fired mortars at IDF vehicles and soldiers, laying siege to al-Shifa. Moving on to the central parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF reported airstrikes that targeted several Hamas operatives as they were transporting weapons from one region to another. Reportedly, these airstrikes resulted in substantial secondary explosions, indicating the amount of weapons that they were trafficking from place to place. Minutes later, after that attack, IDF helicopters destroyed the structures that they were operating from. Palestinian sources reported that massive bombings targeted different areas in central Gaza, including al-Nuseirat refugee camp, al-Maghazi refugee camp, as well as Deir al-Balah. So it is unclear which of those is that attack that the IDF was reporting upon. The IDF did not report of other rounds of bombings that occurred in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in Khan Yunis, the IDF is continuing its operation in the al-Amal neighborhood. This is in the most western parts of Khan Yunis. Substantial gun battles were reported throughout the region. In one of the battles, it was reported that explosive devices detonated in the vicinity of IDF units, and the fighting still continued. Several IDF units were reportedly injured in that explosion. In addition, there's ongoing intensive fighting that is reported in the al-Qarara region. This is in the eastern parts of Khan Yunis. In addition to this, still in Khan Yunis, Palestinian sources reported major IDF bombings in the areas of al-Mughraqa. This is in the northern parts of Khan Yunis. I note this because it's also important to remember that the IDF is not operating ground forces in these areas in the northern parts of Khan Yunis. The fact that all of a sudden major bombings are being reported by sources on the ground may indicate that the IDF is turning its attention now to that area in the northern parts of Khan Yunis. Remains to be seen how that develops in the coming days. In addition, also still in Khan Yunis, Al-Qassam brigades reported successfully targeting an IDF tank with Yasin 105 missiles within the city. They did not report specifically where in the city. They stated that several IDF soldiers were injured and killed. The IDF did not confirm this specific statement of the Al-Qassam brigades. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. The IDF published intelligence documents today showing that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad recognize that roughly 11% of their rocket launches fail and result in Palestinian casualties because either they fail to launch and cause detonation on site, or the launches don't manage to cross over to Israel and land in Palestinian territory. One document is reportedly from 2020 showing Hamas requesting the al-Quds brigades of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad to not position their rocket launchers near Hamas activists since they tend to backfire. The IDF, as they published this, emphasized that rocket launchers have been placed around schools, mosques, and hospitals throughout the Gaza Strip. Other documents the IDF published are from 2022. They show that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad had tallied the amount of Palestinians that were killed from failed rocket launchers, and then also show in the documents that they plan to state that these were actually killed by Israeli interceptors that failed and landed within the Gaza Strip. Again, all these documents are being collected right now by the IDF in the Gaza Strip. They do not pertain specifically to the launches that are going on in the war right now, but the IDF is building a case that a lot of the launches are failing, and these also cause Palestinian deaths within the Gaza Strip. Other news, Al Jazeera published a report and video footage today showing two Palestinians in the Gaza Strip who approached IDF soldiers waving white flags, who are then shot and killed, and their bodies are removed with a tractor and shoveled to the side of the road amidst other rubble. The report stated that this occurred in the Al Rashid Road in the northern parts of Gaza City, stating that the Palestinians were trying to return to their home in the northern parts of the Strip. The IDF stated in response that the footage is edited from two different events, stating that in the first one, a Palestinian was shot and lightly injured after he did not adhere to IDF instructions, and after questioning and medical treatment, he was released. The IDF did state that in the second event, that relates more to a lot of the footage that was published. The statement said, and I quote, "Palestinian suspects approached the IDF force suspiciously wearing backpacks and were shot after not responding to warning shots. They were removed with a tractor out of concern for the fact that they might be carrying explosives." That is the IDF response, not saying that this event did not happen, however explaining, as far as the IDF is concerned, the circumstances in which this happened. Again, in Al Jazeera, that video was published. I'm not showing some of the more gruesome pictures from Al Jazeera, but this is one image that is from that report. Other news, the Haaretz newspaper published a detailed report recently analyzing the IDF's positions that it is seemingly intending to take up in the Gaza Strip in the more long term after the fighting ends or some sort of long-term ceasefire does take effect. The newspaper analyzed the buffer zone that the IDF has been preparing alongside the border with Israel, as well as the Netzarim corridor, that is the corridor that divides the Gaza Strip from north to south, and the different positions and possibly outposts that the IDF has been constructing in that area. The report shows detailed satellite images of the flattening operations the IDF engineering units have been carrying out throughout the areas adjacent to the border with Israel. These are operations that the IDF has been carrying out for several months already, in which it is bringing in bulldozers and basically, again, quote-unquote, flattening areas that are adjacent to the border with Israel in order to create this buffer zone. The IDF has stated that it does not destroy any house unless there is evidence that the house was used for terror activity. However, entire neighborhoods have been flattened in these operations. According to the Haaretz report, it is estimated that the zone is going to be roughly 1 kilometer into the Gaza Strip and running all across the border between Gaza and Israel from north to south, and ultimately this will encompass about 16% of the Gaza Strip's territory. In addition, satellite images are shown analyzing the construction of the Netzarim or Nusrat corridor, specifically the different locations near Salahuddin Road and the coastal road where the IDF appears to be creating staging grounds to control traffic in the more long-term future. I'll add, just for context, that this is a map that shows very clearly on the red line where the Netzarim corridor is. I mention this because often I talk about the Netzarim corridor in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. This is the division, as far as the IDF is concerned, between northern parts of the Gaza Strip and southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Anything to the north of this line is considered the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Anything to the south of this line is the southern parts. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 254. Several IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, and likely the increase in the reported numbers also includes IDF soldiers who were injured in the al-Amal attack that I reported upon yesterday. The total number of IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,544. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 73 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 32,705. 75,190 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. I've been asked several times recently about these numbers, so I'll say two things about that. First of all, I did put out a video on February 29th that specifically explains the different calculations, how each one of the actors calculates the amount of people who have died in the war, so you could check out that video if you want more details, specifically on the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip. The questions I was asked was, do these numbers include combatants and innocent civilians? The answer is yes. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip puts out collective numbers of how many Palestinians have died and their bodies are accounted for in hospitals in the Gaza Strip. They do not distinguish between combatants and innocent civilians. The IDF, in turn, does not put out numbers about how many Palestinians have been killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began. The last time that the IDF did put out any numbers stating how many combatants have been killed, they said that roughly 13,000 Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other combatants in the Gaza Strip have been killed since the war began. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, a convoy of 3 ships departed Cyprus today, headed for the Gaza Strip, reportedly carrying 400 tons of food and aid. The World Central Kitchen that is coordinating these missions reported that the vessels are carrying products such as rice, pasta, flour, beans, canned vegetables, and protein, all of which can be used to make over 1 million meals in the Gaza Strip. They are also reportedly carrying large quantities of figs, which are customary for the end of Ramadan. Other news related to the humanitarian situation. After yesterday, a U.S. source stated that the problem with aid in the Gaza Strip is a shortage of trucks within Gaza, today the IDF coordinator of activities in the Palestinian territories, General Rassan Alian, tweeted a picture showing hundreds of containers of humanitarian aid waiting on the Gazan side of Kerem Shalom. He stated that, yet again, the contents of 400 aid trucks are awaiting to be picked up and distributed on the Palestinian side of the Kerem Shalom crossing after they have passed Israeli inspections. He added that if the aid agencies of the UN, and specifically UNRWA, cannot do their job, they should admit failure and increase their logistical operations. Israel has been stating for many months already that it wants to dismantle UNRWA and move to work with other agencies. This is one of the reasons the World Central Kitchen is becoming more active in the Gaza Strip. This is part of what Israel is saying, that the United Nations is not actually functioning because it is not distributing aid fast enough. In turn, the United Nations has been stating in the last several days that it is trying to coordinate many more humanitarian aid missions, but actually they are often being withheld by the IDF. Moving on to the West Bank, local Palestinian sources reported a large IDF raid that took place in the Kabatia village near Jenin. According to reports, undercover units entered the village in search for wanted Palestinians, and violence eventually broke out. A 13-year-old Palestinian, Mu'tasim Nabil Abu Abed, who was reportedly killed in these confrontations, and several people were injured. The IDF stated that forces fired towards Palestinians who were participating in the confrontations. However, they are investigating the matter of the 13-year-old Palestinian who was shot and killed. Other IDF activity was also reported in the areas of Kalkilia, where confrontations also broke out and several Palestinians were injured. There were also reportedly confrontations that broke out in Jericho, where the IDF has imposed what's called a breathing siege as it hunts down a Palestinian who carried out an attack in the Jordan Valley 2 days ago. So confrontations also erupted. It did not say where they erupted in Jericho. Likely this was in this area of the siege. Other news, the Israeli police reported arresting 16 Palestinian Israeli citizens and residents of East Jerusalem on suspicions of incitement and supporting terrorism while they were in Al-Aqsa Mosque over the weekend. The police stated that in interrogations, some admitted to calling chants in support of Hamas and calling for attacking Jews, and others admitted to calling to chants that were calling upon Hezbollah to fire on Tel Aviv. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, after the escalations of the last week, and then there's been a few days of relative calm and then more escalations. Today was again relatively calm from both sides. There were several barrages of rockets that were launched from Lebanon by Hezbollah targeting northern parts of Israel. However, there were no reports in Israel regarding where these rockets actually landed or what they were targeting, so it is possible that they were launched by Hezbollah but did not manage to penetrate into Israeli airspace. In addition to this, there were several drone alerts that were sounded throughout the day in the Upper Galilee and Western Galilee of northern Israel. In one of the instances in the Upper Galilee, there was a very strange report that was given stating that a drone penetrated the Israeli airspace, then disappeared. Then later reports stated that the drone exploded in mid-air in Ma'alot Tarchisha. However, the IDF also stated that the drone was not intercepted. Regarding IDF activity, IDF warplanes reportedly carried out 3 simultaneous attacks in the areas of Ataibe, Anakora, and Hanin village. The target was reportedly Hezbollah infrastructure. In addition to this, Al-Ahbar also reported IDF attacks in the area between Sikhin and El Javin. The IDF also stated that in response to the launches of rockets, artillery was fired towards the launching sites. Other news, 4 officials of UNIFIL, this is the UN mission to southern Lebanon, were reportedly injured today when an explosive device detonated near their vehicle in the area of Ramish. Hezbollah immediately accused the IDF of firing into the region. The IDF in turn stated that no such fire took place. UNIFIL put out a statement stating that the detonation was from a shell that was in the area and that the organization is investigating. There has been so much firing between the IDF and Hezbollah in recent months since the war began. It is very possible this is a shell that failed to detonate either by Hezbollah or the IDF. UNIFIL is going to investigate. We'll likely find out more about this in the future. Other news related to the northern front of Israel, this time to Syria. Local sources in Syria reported that warplanes attacked a Syrian outpost west of the Dara region. However, this was only reported by local sources to media outlets. There was no information given by the IDF or by the Syrian government. Usually one of them puts out some report about what happened. In this case, local sources said that the warplanes carried out this attack. We may find out more about this in the coming days. In addition to this, amidst all the escalations in the last several days between, reportedly, the IDF and Syria, including the attack in Halab airport that was very unusual and killed many people, the IDF reported that a warplane intercepted an aerial target that was on its way from Syria to Israel, and that the target did not cross into Israeli airspace. Now, usually, when an aerial target is reported, that means a drone. However, again, the IDF might have said that if it was a drone, so it may have been a missile, unclear. In addition to this, it is important to note that there are several pro-Iranian militias that have fired many drones from Syria trying to target Israel. However, again, usually the IDF would report this if it was fired from a specific militia. It is technically possible that this is actually something that was fired by the Syrian army in the attack in Halab airport in the last several days. Some 38 Syrian soldiers were killed. According to reports, the number went up overnight. So it is possible that this was from the Syrian army. However, it is more likely something that was launched by a local militia. Again, we may find out more about this in the coming days. Some political and general trends from the last 24 hours, and this time relating to protests. For the 7th day in a row, there are escalating protests in Jordan's capital, Amman. Thousands of people are marching to and around the Israeli embassy in the area, with some people trying to break into the embassy in the last several days. The embassy is evacuated and empty at this point. However, Jordanian security is keeping people away. The protests, however, are getting more massive and more violent, so we may find out in the coming days if this is going to escalate more as we come to the last Friday of Ramadan. In addition to this, there's also escalating protests that occurred in Israel. Family members of hostages declared in the protests that they carried out on Saturday night that they have come to recognize that Netanyahu is holding up a hostage deal for political gain. Among the speeches that were given at the various different protests, the mother of one of the hostages stated with regards to Netanyahu, and I quote, "We have no choice but to declare, after 176 days, you have not brought a deal because you are busy torpedoing the deal. We recognize that you are the obstacle for a hostage exchange." Another hostage's child, this time, so her parent is held in captivity, stated, again I quote, "We have all seen how Netanyahu's personal political interest is his driving force for decision-making, and his concern for preserving his coalition far outweighs his concern to save lives and bring our loved ones home." So again, I mention this because while this is more related to Israel's internal politics, there is mounting internal political fracture in Israel that may end up resulting in the government actually losing some members of the coalition, which may, again, in turn, lead to the government falling. And if this happens, this will have obviously a monumental impact on the way the war develops. So now the pressure is also being mounted by the family members of different hostages. If you find these reports important, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.